So, good morning everybody. Now, I will start the introductory level of this course, advances in welding and joining technologies. So, to some extent we know about the different welding techniques, and we have seen in the several places that materials are joining simply gas welding processes or some other welding processes. But if we look into the science behind this welding and joining technologies, and then we can find out that most of the subjects are involved in welding and joining technologies. For example, here we will be able to know that heat transfer analysis, the involvement in welding processes, material flow and any kind of stress analysis, distortion level and metallurgical changes, that means structural changes, microstructure, that means material science, metallurgical engineering as well as mechanical, manufacturing, some design, and all are basically involved in this in the welding processes. So, we will try to get some idea, some basic idea about this process. So, that we will try to cover the welding science and what are the technological development of this process till date, that we will try to cover in this module. So, the module consists of this following sections. Maybe you can say that first is the classification of the welding processes, then what are the physics of welding processes, and then mostly use the fusion welding processes, their development and different types of the welding processes. What are the brazing and soldering processes? Soldering processes in regular life we can see that to mainly we can use on some electrical circuit board. There is typical application of the soldering processes, but brazing also in industrial scale application also there, but we will try to look into that what is the typical mechanism of brazing and soldering processes. Then adhesive bonding is one kind of the joining processes. We will try to cover these topics also. Physics of welding arc, because so far much development has been done in the arc welding processes. So, we will try to get some idea about the physics involved the formation of the arc and in very specific to the welding processes. Then more advanced topics in this section, that is what is the influence of the surface active elements, and based on that what are the different welding processes has been developed or maybe existing welding process, what way we can modify these welding processes by considering the effect of the surface active elements. And finally, we will try to cover the magnetically impelled arc welding process. So, these are the module of this different section of this module, and that name of this module has been given in such that way that fundamentals of welding and joining. We will try to get some idea, basic physics involved in the welding processes or most conventional welding processes, the different technology of the welding processes. We will just to get some broad idea about the processes. If we see that almost all sector of the industry, there is a need of joining of the materials, that can be done either fusing of the metals or maybe using some adhesives or some other joining techniques. If we see, listed some of the applications area. So, electrification, automobile, airplane, water supply and distribution, electronics, radio and television, agricultural sector, computer, telephone, air conditioning, and of course, almost all sector it is covering this thing. So, it is indeed is very much important to know about the fundamentals of the different welding processes. Now, if you see the mostly use this technology in the airplane or aerospace industry, highway, and the health technologies, spacecraft, and the recently the different welding processes has been developed looking into the application of the high performance materials. So, it covers almost all the sector. So, here the importance of the welding processes, and we will, before going into details, much details about all the welding processes, we will try to get some basic mechanism of all this process. Probably it can be a review of the different welding processes, their mechanisms are only will be focusing in this part. And now, how we can define that what is the welding and joining. So, there is no precision definition of welding processes or joining processes, rather we can say that when two metals, specifically metallic materials, are joined by fusing with the application of different type of the heat source. So, that in general that is called the welding processes. Normally welding with involvement, there is a fusion is there, and joining processes maybe in other way, that for example, that when you use some fasteners, mechanical riveting and use the fastener to joining the two components, that is also termed as the joining processes, but there is no need of any kind of fusion or maybe atom to atom covalences is not required in that cases. So, that can be considered as a joining process. For example, even in adhesive bonding also, if you use some glue and to join two materials, that can be also called a joining process, but here the mechanism of joining process is different from the fusion processes. So, that fusion is happening in the welding and joining processes, specifically that is termed as the fusion welding process. Of course, we can say that solid state welding processes also can be considered. We generally say solid state welding process, sometimes also we can say it is a solid state joining processes. Even the soldering and brazing, that is also the application of the third metal, try to join the two different material by fusing the third metal, but not necessary to melt the parent metal. So, that is the basic mechanism of the soldering and brazing mechanism. So, that also we can say one typical joining mechanism. So, in general we can say that it is a not only welding or not only joining process, we can say it is a welding and joining processes of the materials, irrespective of metals or irrespective of any non-metals also. Now, critical technologies in manufacturing, mainly recent or maybe huge application, or I can say the maximum application of welding and joining technologies we observe in the construction industry and as well as the mining industry, and specifically in this case the joining or welding of the materials involves there is a huge large amount or maybe thickness, or the thickness of the metal is very high in this case. But at the same time, if we find out the very precision application of the welding and joining technologies that we observe in the health technologies, biomedical devices, there we can find out the requirement of the joining of the very small thickness, maybe less, sometimes it is requirement is maybe less than 100 micrometer. So, we say that as such the application of the welding and joining observed from the very precision instrument in the level of 100 micrometer or less than that, to a large extent that we observe in the huge thickness or the bulk joining of the material, we can find out in the construction and the construction, specifically if you try to make a bridge, there also apart from the rivet joint, the welded joint can also be done for the construction industry. Specifically the example is the making the bridge, the river bridge, and then another cases is that mining industry also we can find out there is a huge application of the large scale welding processes. So, apart from very large scale to very small scale, there is importance of the different welding and joining technologies. So, now here we will try to focus in general of the welding technologies, and there is a separate module of the micro joining and nano joining section, where we will try to focus on the very precision welding processes in very small scale. But why it is important, the welding and joining analysis of all this welding and joining? Because from the past it has been observed that if the technologies of welding and joining are not proper probably we can find out there is a formation of the defects, and presence of the defects may lead to the catastrophic failure of the whole structure, and that can lead to the loss of property as well as the human life. So, here is the important to analyze the different welding processes, and if there is a formation of the defects, or whether we can choose the different welding technologies for without any defects. So, this is not only the problem in the welding industry, the formation of the defects by the improper choice of the welding materials or improper selection of the materials, in the sense that with respect to the material, the if welding process is not proper, then there may be the problem of the formation of the welding defects. Not only this, finally, if we use any kind of welding processes, whether it is solid state welding processes or fusion welding processes, we can find out that there may be the formation of the some amount of the residual stress and distortion that can be controlled, but that cannot be completely avoided. So, presence of residual stress also affect the life of the welded joint. So, always we try to target to reduce the nature of distortion and nature of the residual stress. So, that is also another problem, or maybe I can say that that is the inherit that comes by inheritance, that presence of the any kind of residual stress and defects during the welding processes.